If we have a look at our index.html page, we got everything prepared. We got a loading text which we could display whilst we're fetching the data. And then we got the actual weather data, but of course we need to replace those dummy texts here to display description, temperature, and city name. Now to do all of that, we first need to get references to those elements. And that of course is a job for the init.js file. So in here, I'll fetch a couple of new things. I'll fetch my loading text here, and I can do this with a query selector, of course. The question is, for what do I query? Well, it has an ID of load, so I can simply use that. So I will just use hashtag load to fetch it by ID. Notice that I always use query selector and not query selector all, because I'm always interested in the first element in this case. If I were interested in the second element, I needed query selector all and then access the right element in the array of elements I get back, just as a refresher. I also need to fetch my weather box. This is the overall weather item here. So I will fetch this also with a query selector, of course. Query selector, and maybe you already saw it, but selector. This does also have an ID of weather. So I'll use this ID to get it. And then I need to fetch the city, description, and temperature here. Now I can do this in a couple of ways. For example, I can get the weather city. Let's start with that. So the very first element here, I could get this by using my weather box and then the first element child. And this should get me my weather city here, of course. That's one way. Then I also need the weather description. And here I'll again use a query selector, just mixing some things up here to see them all. So the query selector with the ID weather description here, just with a hashtag again, and then weather description. And finally the temperature here, of course, too. And here I can also use my weather box and then access the last element child. Since, well, it is the last element child here, right? Temperature is the last element in this weather div. So with that, I'm loading all those fields. I'm getting references to all those elements which I'll need. And I then may use those elements in my app.js file, of course. Now here, I could write all the code into this function, but I think this function is already long enough. So I'll create a new one, which I'll call update weather. And this expects to get some weather data with which it should update the screen here. And I want to use my weather city here and set the text content. This is another property available on this HTML element, which basically will replace the text between the opening and closing tag. So this city name dummy text as it is now. This will replace this text with whatever I enter now here on the right side of the equal sign. So to whatever I set it to. I will set it to weather data.cityname, and weather data, of course, is just my weather object here. I'll pass that. So I want to replace it here. So I can actually call this right now. I will call update weather here and pass my weather data object to it. Of course, I not only want to update the city name, I also want to update the description. So here I'll also replace the text content with weather data dot description. And I'll do the very same for the temperature. So text content here should be equal to weather data dot temperature. And I can't really tell you why this is green. So with that, I'm updating all of that, but we still wouldn't see it because it's hidden, right? So we should probably access weather, this weather box here indeed. So we should access the weather box, the style, and set its display to block. So I'm just changing the CSS style of this weather box. Let's see this. If I now type London and click show weather, what will happen? I see the information for London here. And if I now type Berlin, it updates to Berlin. So that's great, but it can be improved a tiny little bit. I also have the loading text, right? You can see it here. And I want to display this while the data is being fetched. Now the data is fetched super fast here, but nonetheless it might be slower on other machines or depending on your internet connection and so on. So I want to display this, and in order to display this, right here in the search weather function, when I start searching for the weather, I will use my loading text reference, which I created in my init.js here. So this is just the loading text element, and I will set the display style here to block, so to display it. And I will also set the weather box style to none, to hide it. Now, of course, it's hidden by default, but if you already loaded a city, I want to hide it again until the new city has been loaded. Therefore, of course, here at the end, I also need to, when I display the weather info, I need to switch my loading text to be hidden. So here style display should be none, because I don't want to see the loading text if the data is there. So with all that, if I now search for London, you should see loading text for a fraction of a second. Closely watch this part of the screen. Do you see it? London. And if I search for Berlin, you should see loading flicker up for part of a second here too. Yeah, you can see it for certain, well, very short duration. And that is all the code that is to this little app. We are able to fetch data from a third-party service to live update our view without ever reloading the page. We're able to convert the Celsius degrees to Fahrenheit, and you saw getters and setters, you saw how to define a property, you saw quite a lot of things covered throughout this course, condensed in this tiny little example. And together with all the other examples in this course, I'm sure you're well prepared to use all that knowledge in whatever project you want to use it. I wish you best of luck for that, and see you in all the other videos, whatever you might watch. I'm always happy to greet you. Bye.